Chesapeake will now come to order. Mr. Clerk, if you'd open the roll for our attendance, indicate your attendance on your electronic voting machine. Close the roll. We have a quorum. For those of you in the audience and members of the committee as well, the Speaker has advised us of referring certain bills. And members of the committee, you have before you a printout sheet of what those bills are, and I want you to note also as to where they go. So, administrative referrals, going down the list, and unless there's objection, we'll just do these in a block. Administrative referrals to Labor and Commerce, House Bill 20, House Bill 110, House Bill 754, House Bill 981, House Bill 1152, House Bill 1184, House Bill 1239, House Bill 1298, House Bill 1303, House Bill 1360. To Communications and Technology and Innovation, the Speaker has asked us to transfer House Bill 1215. And to Rules Committee, the Speaker has requested that we refer House Bill 1454.
These were added.
Also added this morning is House Bill 27 and House Bill 1192 to send to courts, two bills to courts. Any questions about the referrals? These are coming to the direction of the Speaker. It's been moved. Is there a second? That these bills in a block be referred as reported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We also have certain bills that the patrons have requested to be struck. The bills to be stricken at the request of the patron are House Bill 1065, Delegate Corey, House Bill 1306, Delegate Corey, and House Bill 1454, which is added to your list, Delegate Heritage. Those three bills have been, the patron has requested that we strike them.
And that's a recorded vote.
And it's a recorded vote. Anybody have any trouble with us voting those in a block? So we have a motion. Second. Okay, this is a recorded vote to strike these three bills at the request of the patron. All vote on the electronic voting board. 16, clerk will close the roll. 16-0, those bills have been struck. We now can move on to our subcommittee reports, and thanks to the chairpersons who've been working very studiously to get our docket moved forward. We'll go first to the Agricultural Subcommittee report. Delegate Itis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first bill, we had three bills come out of committee, and the first one is HB 119, Delegate Knight, and it is about milk, the definition, misbranding the product, and to prohibit, implement a ban on all products misbranded as milk. It reported 7-1. Oh, all right, sorry. And it has a substitute, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Moved and second that substitute be adopted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The Delegate Knight, the subcommittee recommends reporting with substitute 7-1. Do you have questions of the chair of the subcommittee? Any questions of the subcommittee chair? Any discussion on the bill? The subcommittee recommends reporting. Clerk will stand seconded. Clerk will open the roll. HB 119, vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. The bill is reported 10-7. Next bill.
The next bill, Mr. Chairman, is HB 1002 from Delegate Guzman. It is about a grant program, agriculture and forestry industries development planning grants. So it reported 8-0, and we have a letter from the Speaker that the bill needs to be referred to appropriations.
Any questions as chairman of the subcommittee on House Bill 1002?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Delegate Gilbert.
I'm still not clear on, I wonder if there's an existing grant program, what it does and what the addition of the political subdivisions to the grant program would accomplish specifically.
Dr. Gillides.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that all this does is codify practice that has been going on. If there's someone in the audience who can back that up, I would, if I'm right. If I'm wrong, please correct me.
You identify yourself, please.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Committee. Heidi Hertz, Assistant Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry. Thank you for your question. Yes, ma'am, you're correct. This is codifying the existing APHID program planning grant. The genesis of the grant was to have an infrastructure and program component. This is codifying the program component of that grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Hearing none, then the clerk will open the roll. The motion is to report and refer to appropriations. All those in favor vote aye on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. The vote is 17-0 to report. And does that complete your report?
No, Mr. Chairman, the last one is HB 1034 from Delegate Razul. It's another grant program. It's one that is particularly aimed at supporting small farmers and such businesses as local processing facilities and farmers markets. It reported 6-2, and also we have a letter from the Speaker saying it needs to be referred to appropriations. Oh, yes. Sorry, and we have a sub for that one as well. Substitute for that
There's a
one.
motion and a second to adopt the substitute. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the substitute before us, you have questions on House Bill 1034 substitute. Questions or discussion on House Bill 1034? Hearing none, the subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had my.
Well, I'm sorry. Use your request to speak button, and I will try to remember to look at the request to speak response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we looked at this in subcommittee, it was my opinion that we have the APHID grant program already in place that's able to do what was being proposed, and so that's why I voted against it and really don't see a need to move the bill forward.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Can I address
Yes,
that,
sir.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry. Delegate Poindexter.
Yes, I have a question on line 17. It mentions regional producers, and does this mean North Carolina, maybe Maryland, West Virginia? Perhaps DLS could define regional for me?
I would like to address what Delegate Webert said first. Oh, no, wait a minute. Delegate Wilt, sorry. It's my understanding that the funds from this will go directly to the farmers rather than to the locality. So I think it's different in that way. Again, if someone is here and I need to be corrected, please correct me. As far as Delegate Poindexter's comment, I'm not sure we had a really clear answer to that, but I think this is aimed at Virginians. Is there anyone here to correct me?
Well, Madam Chair, this is the Virginia legislature and the Virginia piece of legislation. It's not a regional issue.
Mr. Chairman, I would just comment, a lot of my district borders North Carolina, and a lot of people are already trying to slip North Carolina food into the food markets out along the Carolina line.
Delegate Goditis.
Delegate Poindexter, well, wait a minute, let's see, back to Delegate Wilt. So I stand corrected. Our attorney has pointed out that the changes in the substitute do give the funds to political subdivisions. And I think that is a change. So,
Thank you. Follow-up question? Is this fund, is there appropriations in the governor's proposed, introduced budget?
Delegate Goditis.
I'm sorry, Ms. Delegate, could you repeat that question?
Is this fund have an appropriation in the introduced budget to fund it?
I believe there was an accompanying. Oh, okay, not in the introduced budget, but he has a budget amendment.
Fine, thank you.
And I suggest that since there are some outstanding questions still resolved, that we just pass this by for the day, and we'll take it up next time with a little further understanding of what the bill does. So without objection, we'll pass by House Bill 1034. That completes your report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, moving on to the Chesapeake Subcommittee report. Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Chesapeake Subcommittee reported out 7 bills. Just to start, Delegate Krizik's bill, HB 173, regarding waterfowl blinds in a locality where certain hunting is prohibited. The subcommittee recommended reporting with a substitute. Can we move the substitute?
Substitute for House Bill 173 has been moved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
So the subcommittee recommended reporting by a vote of 5-3. So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that House Bill 173 be reported with a substitute. Questions or comments from the committee? Doug Bloxham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a question on that day. There was no state agency there to answer the questions that we had. Didn't know about the reason why blinds had been permitted in an area where they had not been previously, and we were kind of questioning that procedure and who controls what area is why the no votes on that bill.
The Delegate Krizak is here. Delegate Krizak, you heard the question.
Yeah, so this is the history of this is quite long, and I've lived there all my life, and I can remember once upon a time we were in a much more rural area, and there used to be duck blinds on these creeks here. But since that time, there's been a lot of infill, and there's houses everywhere, and the county some years ago has passed an ordinance that you couldn't hunt in that area, and that's a safety precaution because you've got houses within 50 yards, even closer, frankly. And so there hasn't been anybody, and no one's been putting duck blinds because you couldn't hunt. But somehow there's a weird situation where you can actually get a duck blind permit, but you in an area where you can't hunt. And so I guess the only thing you could do is you could hunt with a bow and arrow if you wanted to, but you wouldn't be hunting ducks, shooting upwards from a duck blind. And I don't even hunt. Obviously, I don't know a thing about hunting, but I do know that you wouldn't shoot an arrow up into the air. And if you're doing, we do some deer calls in my neighborhood, and we do it from up in the tree shooting downwards, so that arrow, we know where that arrow goes. So that could be the reason that duck blinds are still permitted. But my community is really, they are very scared that there's going to be hunting there, and we can't, and that duck blinds just popped up, and that's why this bill's here today.
Mr. Chair.
Bloxham.
Is that a tidal creek that we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions of the patron? The subcommittee has recommended reporting. Clerk will open the roll. House Bill 173, vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. The bill is reported, 10 ayes, 8 nays. Thank you. Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next bill on our docket was from Delegate Hope, HB 504, Chesapeake Bay Preservation Areas regarding the preservation of mature trees. Subcommittee recommended reporting with amendments.
Staff will report the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, the amendments are in the packet, and they are as follows. On line 29, after trees, insert or planting of trees. Also on line 29, after the letter A, strike the remainder of line 29 and through management on line 30 and insert water quality protection. And finally, on line 30, after the word other, insert natural resource.
Any questions on the amendments? Delegate Lopez moves the amendments. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the amendments say aye.
Aye.
House Bill 504 is before us. Questions about House Bill 504? Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, the vote was 7-1 in subcommittee.
The subcommittee reports with amendment, recommends reporting with amendments. Clerk will open the roll. All those in favor, vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. Vote is 15-3. Report with amendments.
Rob, you're the one that made me worried about that one.
Delegate
Your mic is on.
Lopez.
Whoever's speaking, your mic is on. The next vote is HB
You educated
520.
me the other day.
Next bill is HB 520 from Delegate Bulova regarding trees as well. DEQ to convene an advisory committee to study planting or preservation. Subcommittee recommended reporting with a substitute, and it passed out of subcommittee 8-0.
House Bill 520, Delegate Bulova's report with a substitute before us. Substitute been distributed?
Yes, I believe Scott has.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Any question about the substitute? Have a motion on the substitute?
Second.
So moved and seconded, substitute be adopted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Substitute's adopted. The bill's before us. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, clerk will open the roll.
Vote.
House Bill 520, report with a substitute. Everyone voted. Clerk will close the roll. Vote is 16 ayes, 1 nay. Bill is reported with substitute. Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next bill is HB 653 from Delegate Guy, condemning growing beds of electronic maps. Subcommittee recommended reporting 8-0.
Okay, the House Bill 653 is before us. Any questions, discussion? House Bill 653, use your request to speak button.
And this is a voice vote.
What is the motion on this?
To incorporate. to incorporate into 706?
No, not 653.
No, that's a different
Okay, Doug Lopez, would you repeat your motion?
Subcommittee recommended reporting. I would move that we pass the bill 8-0. And when it passed in subcommittee.
Second.
That we report the bill or pass?
Report the bill. I apologize.
Okay. So House Bill 653, the bill is before us with a recommendation to report. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the clerk will open the roll. The motion is to report. All in favor, vote on the electronic voting board. Vote is 18-0. The bill is reported.
Delegate Lindsay wants to state his House Bill 27.
Delegate Lindsay, I apologize, sir. If you'll take then we'll interrupt the report for just a moment. You have a motion.
As it relates to HB 27,
Okay.
I believe that the docket, I believe that the agenda that's posted says that that's been asked to be assigned to another committee. But my request would be that that's legislation that needs more work. And so I'd like for you to lay it on the table.
Just a minute. I think, is this one of the ones that we had
We referred it.
sent to courts?
Yeah.
Your own courts?
Yeah, but I'd rather you kill it now as opposed to me having to deal with it later.
Well, then
This
so
is one that was added overnight.
Reconsider.
we have a motion to reconsider the vote by which we had referred House Bill 27 to the Courts Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, House Bill 27 is before us. There's a request on the part of the patron that the bill be struck. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Thank you. How you do it is fine. Thank you all very much.
Strike is a court.
And apologize. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee.
Delegate Lopez, we're back to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've received a message from Delegate Keem, who's the patron of HB 706. He'd like to actually take 706 by for the day.
Yes, at the request of the patron, without objection, we'll take by House Bill 706. There's still some work being done on that, so we'll take that by for the day without objection.
Thank you, Mr.
Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last bill on Chesapeake Subcommittee's docket was HB 882 from Delegate Bulova regarding stormwater management, proprietary best management practices, and reciprocity. The subcommittee recommended reporting with a substitute, and it passed 8-0.
Substitute been distributed. Is there a motion on the substitute?
So moved.
Substitute, all in favor of substitute, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Substitute's adopted. The subcommittee recommends reporting the bill with the substitute. Questions or discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will open the roll. House Bill 882, please vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. Ayes 19, noes 0. Bill will be reported with a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That completes the Chesapeake docket for today.
Okay. That,
Hers was rolled into his, so we can do that next week.
all right, so then we're to the Natural Resources Subcommittee. And
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Chair Tron, thank you for your work. The subcommittee met at 7:30 this morning and has a report before us.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first bill to report is House Bill 388, which authorizes the Board of Game and Inland Fisheries to create a special license for hunting elk in the elk management zone. The subcommittee recommended reporting this bill 7-0.
Been moved and seconded to House Bill 388, hunting elk with special license created, be reported. Or you have questions, discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will open the roll. Vote on the electronic voting board.
We have nothing. I have nothing.
The vote is 19-0 to report the bill.
Our next bill to report is House Bill 1074. This changes the term molest to disturb in regards to describing certain unlawful acts against animals of certain species. The subcommittee recommends reporting 7-0 with line amendments. And
Report the line amendments.
Mr. Chairman, for House Bill 1074, the first line amendment is on line 27, and it would go after the word to, T-O, and it would strike the words destroy or, and it would and also disturb, and it would insert disturb with intent to harm or destroy. And then the second line amendment is on the second page, and it is on line 103, and it's after the word disturbing, and it would insert with intent to harm.
Okay, you've heard the amendments. Delegate Gilbert.
And Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I don't have the bill in front of me, so I'm asking our attorney. So does with intent to harm now qualify all of the places where it says disturb or disturbing? Is that the legal standard, that there is an intent element everywhere?
Mr. Chairman, the phrase with intent to harm does qualify the word disturb in the two places where that word is inserted in the bill.
And Mr. Chairman, further question.
Delegate Gilbert.
So the word molest is being removed and disturb with intent, et cetera, is being inserted in all the places where that exists? All right. Further question. Thank you.
Delegate Gilbert.
So this is, I didn't know if the patron just didn't like the term of art or the just choosing a different word, or if it is in fact her intent to narrow the legal standard, because adding an intent element certainly narrows it significantly. And that's for whoever may know the answer to that.
Delegate Plum, if I may.
Yes. Delegate Tron.
We had that discussion this morning, Delegate Gilbert, and the patron explained that molest now has very specific kind of connotations in terms of our lexicon, and so she wanted to make sure that we were appropriately referencing and using the right term to describe what we're doing to animals in the code, and so to these certain species. And so she had made the amendment in conversations and consultation with the board that disturb with the intent to harm has the same meaning as molest in this case, because, for example, we talked about how you can walk by, a flock of birds and you're disturbing the birds, and of course that's not what we mean in this code here, part of the code. But if you're in terms of the intent to harm is the part of getting at what molest would otherwise mean.
Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, that does answer my question, and it raises a separate concern. So if the patron did not like the use of the word, and of course molest means, as the gentlewoman correctly describes in our lexicon, it means something very specific, but the dictionary still means something else very specific, which is pester or harass in an aggressive or persistent manner. And the dictionary hasn't changed, even though common understandings may have changed. Courts of law, the way they interpret these words will not have changed. So if the use of the word was what the issue was, and changing it to a different word that means the same thing but doesn't hurt the ears in some way, if that was the intent, I think the adding of the additional language certainly misses that, because now you've added an intent element. So previously the law did not require an intent to harm. molest with intent to harm, but now it's disturb with intent to harm. And again, molest meant pester or harass in an aggressive or persistent manner with no intent to harm. So if we're adding with these amendments an intent element, that does a lot more than just change the definition to some other word that may be more palatable. It actually changes the level of proof required to prove these crimes.
Delegate Tron, it may be appropriate, since the patron is not here, for this extensive discussion that we pass it by temporarily, at least, to see if the patron will.
And I could still be doing this on courts, Mr. Chairman, but I'm doing it here now, so,
I understand, sir. We welcome
Here I
your
am,
expert
doing my
knowledge.
courts
We
thing.
appreciate your
But
presence.
we also should have the defendant in the courtroom.
I think that would make sense, Delegate, Chairman, Mr. Chair.
So we'll pass that by.
Was that
Delegate
passed by
Tron.
temporarily, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, we'll pass it by temporarily. If the patron, someone can solicit the patron to join us.
Okay.
She's texting her.
We'll text her and see if she can join us. Delegate Tron.
The next bill we have was House Bill 1188, and the patron moved to strike that bill from our docket.
And we don't have to do that.
Oh, we don't have to do that? Okay, I'm sorry. Then we have House Bill 1272, and this bill establishes a senior resident lifetime license for hunting bear, deer, and turkey at $200 for individuals who are residents of Virginia who are 80 years of age or older. We have a line amendment and would recommend reporting the line amendment and the bill. I'm sorry, recommend reporting the bill with the line amendment 6-1.
Scott, will you report the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, for House Bill 1272, the line amendment is on line 29. It's after the word turkey, and it would strike all the rest of that line and the following line. So that sentence would end with hunting bear, deer, and turkey.
Any questions about the amendment? All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Opposed, no. Amendment is agreed to. The subcommittee recommends that the bill as amended be reported. Any questions or discussion? Clerk will open the roll. Please vote, cast your vote. Clerk will close the roll. The bill reports 17-2. Delegate Tron.
The next bill we have to report is House Bill 1307. This bill directs the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries to develop and make available a novice booklet around hunting laws and regulations. We have a substitute for this bill and would recommend reporting the substitute 7-1.
Substitute's been distributed. Should have it at your place. Substitute for House Bill 1307. Do we have a motion that we adopt the substitute?
So moved.
And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's the substitutes before us. The subcommittee recommends that the bill be reported. Any discussion, questions on House Bill 1307? Hearing none, the clerk will open the roll. Cast your vote on the electronic voting board. All member voted. Clerk will close the roll. The bill is reported 17-1. Just by way of explanation for those who are interested in how this goes, I just think we hire professional staff. Got a wonderful staff of people who can figure this out, and we don't need to always give in to our impulses to pass another law. That's in the keeping of the best tradition, isn't it, when you say?
You just made Gilbert switch the vote.
Delegate Tron.
Thank you, sir. The next bill we have is House Bill 1357. This bill allows any Virginia resident to sell a wildlife mount that was taken legally and that underwent the taxidermy process legally. We recommend reporting with a line amendment 8-0.
Okay, we'll have the line amendment, please.
Mr. Chairman, for House Bill 1357 on line 31, after the word mounts, which is stricken, the amendment inserts or fish.
Everybody heard the amendment? Is there a motion?
So moved.
And seconded. The amendment, all in favor say the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The bill as amended is before us. Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate
Mr. Chairman.
Poindexter.
Just a quick question. Would the bill, how about someone that does their own mounting and taxidermy? What about a person that has bagged a deer and wants to mount the antlers and has the capacity to do it for themselves? Would this bill prevent that?
Delegate Trump.
The bill just specifies that it has to be taken legally and that it underwent the taxidermy process legally. And so perhaps if the director, I think, is still in the audience, if he could answer what it means to undergo the taxidermy process legally, and if the delegate's question fits that definition.
Yes, sir. Gentlemen, if you'd come forward and identify yourself.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Ryan Brown, Director of the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. The department has no position on the bill, but the bill is specific to game that's legally taken. And so I think that's the primary qualifier is how the game's procured rather than who does the taxidermy work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will open the roll. The motion is to report with amendments, vote on the electronic voting board.
I don't know what it is. I'm trusting you on this.
All the members voted. Clerk will close the roll. Report 18-1. Delegate
It's
Trump.
America.
Mr. Chair, we have one more bill to report, House Bill 1632. This bill removes the requirement that a person who is hunting on a Sunday do so only on private property. So it broadens, so that you are then allowed to hunt on public land. The committee moved to report this, recommended to report this bill 4-2.
The committee recommends reporting. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Delegate Polo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for those who are relatively new to the committee, a couple years ago, we made the really big decision to allow Sunday hunting on private property. Before that, no Sunday hunting. And so I thought that was a really, really good compromise, and I ended up supporting that. I hope that we'll be very cautious about making a very big decision to open this up to both public and private land. And so this isn't about giving all those animals and critters a day of rest, although they probably do deserve a day of rest. This is about how do you manage and balance competing uses of public land, right? And so this is an opportunity for our hikers, our bikers, people who want to camp, to be able to go ahead and use those public lands once a week without having to worry about those conflicting uses. But I would encourage the committee not to make this big policy decision and would ask that we reject the bill.
Thank you, Delegate Vic Thomas.
Mr. Chair.
So, Delegate Simons.
I have a question about this. I know that my family enjoys going to some of our national forests. So if I were to go to, Washington National Forest on a Sunday with my family and I wanted to take a walk, how would I know if there were hunters in the forest or not?
Delegate Evans, you happen to be the patron of the bill. Would you like to respond to the delegate's question?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. In response to the delegate, that actually came up as an issue we discussed, and Director Brown offered that most public lands, the directors of those lands have the authority to decide whether or not there will be usable for hunting. So, for example, some state parks offer it, some do not. I'm assuming maybe the same way. I'm not sure about national forests, to be honest with you. But as you need to be aware of the other days of the week that you may use a national forest, you need to be obviously situationally aware that there could be somebody using that land. So to answer your question, I think you would. I don't know that you would know who was on the property on the national forest example with you at that time. I just don't know how you would, whether they were hunting or whether they were fishing or whatever they're doing. So maybe the Director Brown could speak to that again. I'm not sure.
Does that answer your question, Delegate Simon?
I would just ask that if we do continue to study this, that we look at how hunting on Sunday is communicated to the public as part of the future of this bill.
Okay. I've got a lineup of people now who want to speak. Delegate Weber.
Thank you. I'll just, I guess, speaking to the motion to report. Initially, during the discussion, I was, before the discussion started, I didn't really like the idea of hunting on public lands. However, through a series of questions asked to Director Brown in regards to the way national forests and state forests are regulated already, some of those are quota hunts. National parks only deem certain areas for hunting, and those types of things. I've got a friend who hunts the national park on the other side of the mountain, and he's only allowed to only hunt certain areas. In regards to the other areas, like the wildlife management areas that are basically funded with some of the fees that we pay, those are also at the discretion of VDGIF, whether they're going to allow hunting or not, where to allow hunting. Because my primary concern, particularly with national parks and state parks, was during October when our leaves change, we get a lot of tourists. And Director Brown basically stated that he felt that the bill still gave them the authority to close down certain areas and to allow like quotas and things like that. So through that line of questioning, I felt a little bit more comfortable to vote for the bill.
Thank you. Delegate Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being from an area that certainly does a lot of hunting, this bill certainly has been under discussion for a number of years. I concur with Delegate Bulliver that this was a good compromise that allowed Sunday hunting on just private property. I think opening it up on Sunday to all properties, private and public, is a big step, and I concur, and I don't support this particular piece of legislation.
Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess for the director of the agency, does the agency have a position on this bill?
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, Ryan Brown, DGIF Director. We do not have a position on the bill.
Just to follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a revenue? Would this be a revenue raiser for the state? Is this somehow a thing where the state's going to make more money, or will it be less money because we're actually having to do more oversight? Is there any insight on that?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd respond to the question by saying our experience with Sunday hunting on private lands has shown at least no direct fiscal impact negatively to the department in terms of any positive fiscal impact. I don't know that there's a way you could quote a direct fiscal positive from this particular piece of legislation. Whether or not somebody decides to hunt depending on a number of factors, scheduling being one of them, so you could say this could contribute to it in that way, but I don't have a number that I could give you that we would expect to see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Wilt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just speaking to the measure,
Speaking.
I'd encourage the body to support this bill. back, those of us that were here when we originally passed, broke into that new territory of hunting on Sundays, there was a lot of concern about the potential, whatever problems, all kinds of things, ideas that could go wrong. And I'm confident that the department could back me up that none of that has happened. We haven't had accidents. There haven't been altercations between landowners and hunters any more than hunting the other days of the week. Statistics show that hunting on Sunday doesn't harm the animals. They don't really go by the calendar of the week, and so that hasn't proven to be an issue. And Mr. Chairman, I would also tell the body that just on private land disenfranchises a certain portion of our populace. There are folks that work. The whole idea behind Sunday hunting was there's folks out there that work 6 days a week. They don't have an opportunity to go on Saturday. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. And so Sunday is the only time that they had to go. And there's a lot of folks out there that don't have access to private land. And so they don't have a friend or a relative that has land adequate to hunt on. So the public land is another opportunity for them to enjoy the outdoors. And as far as going to the question of that was raised about how do you identify someone that's in the woods hunting, depends on what season that we're talking about. A large part of the hunting seasons require the hunter to have on a certain amount of blaze orange.
Don't bring that up. That'll take another hour to debate that.
or I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, blaze pink.
Yeah.
And that's one way to identify. There's some seasons that folks are hunting with dogs. Yeah, don't have any trouble seeing the dog wagons, up and down the roads as they're hunting whatever species they're after. And so that's one way of identifying that there's people in the woods. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd also say I can't cite specific the statistics, but the incidence of folks being injured or killed from a hunter due to just being in the same area in piece of woods, it's very, very, very low. And so, I know that's a concern to some folks, but it's just, it's more accidents happen when two hunters are together or someone climbing across a fence or something like that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Delegate Edmonds, you want to have the last word?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, and I don't want to prolong debate. If you will recall, I not only voted against it, I railed against this when we first brought up Sunday hunting, and then I started hunting on Sunday after church, and it became, and I'll tell you why I did that. Why? Right. My daughter, who was, I guess she was 11 at the time, she loved to go hunting with me. And the only days that she could go were Saturday and now Sunday. And so during hunting season, especially deer season, we go to church, we eat lunch, and we go hunting. And I know that we're trying to recruit youth to the sport. I know that everyone recognizes that hunting license sales are down, and they are. And a lot of that is due in part that we're not doing as good a job of recruiting our next generation and giving them an appreciation of the woods. And, a great way to do that is through hunting and time spent together. So, right now, because of school, during the week, children get, one evening or one morning. And so Sunday hunting, it really brought us closer together, quite frankly, and I don't think it's basically been a non-issue. I think you could ask the department if they've had complaints, and probably would be a valid question. Hunter license fees pays especially for wildlife management areas, they buy those areas for the public to use, and it's kind of hypocritical for them not to be able to use them, just personally. So for those reasons, I changed my mind, and I hope it would be the will of the committee to do so, too.
Thank you, Delegate Edmonds. I didn't miss the language about after church. Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one quick little point, and I appreciate Delegate Edmonds and Delegate Wilt. I think the point that I want to make is that all families have limited time, and so this is all about balancing competing uses. And so, in the same way that you want to go out on a weekend or a Sunday with your children, same thing applies to me and my children if we wanted to go out and use our limited time over the weekend to go fishing or hiking or biking or camping. And I'll tell you a real story from when we went out to Massanutten this last Christmas break. We had a day that we wanted to go out and simply enjoy a hike with a family. Turns out that trail was closed because of hunting. And so again, this is as balancing different uses. I think the existing law that we have does a nice job of balancing those uses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The subcommittee recommendation was that the bill report, and there were not any amendments, correct?
Correct, Mr. Chair. The subcommittee recommends reporting 4-2.
Okay. So hearing no more discussion, the clerk will open the roll. The motion is to report. Indicate your vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. Votes aye 7, noes 13. The bill is defeated. Okay. Dr. Tron, do you have other bills? Does that complete your report? Oh, actually, we're back to House Bill 1074, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. I think Delegate Adams is here.
If we could, as a courtesy, because of a member's other obligations that are of significance, if we could just hold for a moment and ask Delegate Brewer to come up, it'd be able to take a minute to deal with House Bill 1612. It's on your docket for bills to be taken up today, and it relates to the Virginia Scenic River System. Delegate Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. Members of the committee, House Bill 1612 would grant scenic state river designation on beautiful Grays Creek in Surrey County. This area is a 6-mile stretch just outside the James River near Fort Smith, the Surrey Seafood Company, and many other great destinations. This scenic river designation has been requested by my Surrey County Board of Supervisors and as well as the Garden Club, and it would be my request of this committee to kindly report the bill.
And Delegate Brewer, we have the resolution from your local government.
Yes, sir, I have it here.
Okay. Members of the committee, you will recall that we deal with these fairly routine when they're requested by the local government, as we did last week. The motion is House Bill 1612 be reported. Any discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will open the roll. Cast your vote on the electronic voting machine.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman.
The vote is, clerk will close the roll. Votes 15, nays 3. Bill is reported.
Thank you very much.
All right, Delegate Adams. Delegate Adams, we're back to you. And Delegate Tron, if you will again just briefly give us what your subcommittee recommendation was.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our subcommittee recommended to report with line amendments 7-0. And perhaps if council can just reiterate what the line amendments are so that it's fresh in our minds.
This is House Bill 1074 that we passed by temporarily.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you. I ran over from another building. We had some substitutes in the subcommittee just prior, so I was looking for the specific language to this. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chair, HB 1074 is a bill to essentially update the verbiage in the section of the code that has to do with disturbing, just really destroying or molesting animals, birds, nests, other species, or to do so to be, in the current code, it says you can molest with a permit. And this word has really changed in intent and meaning over time. And so it was initially just to replace the word molest with disturb. During the committee hearing and working with some of the members who are also members of the agricultural community, they felt that disturb could happen at any time unintentionally, and it was important to align with the initial intention of the word molest in the code to make the substitution be disturb with the intent to harm. So we changed the language on the first page, and line 27, it was so that it would read disturb with intent to harm or destroy. And then on page 2, on line 103, disturb with intent to harm. So those were the changes of the bill and the substance of why it was brought forth. And I did have members of the agency who spoke to why the need for clarity was helpful with the words intent to harm. And I'm told that there are questions.
Okay, questions of the patron.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Gilbert.
I would ask the patron, am I correct? I heard you say that your intent was just to update the verbiage and not to change the legal standard here. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, maybe I could, if it just speak to the bill, I just wanted the patron to hear my little diatribe, such as it was. So if your intention isn't to change the legal standard, I would respectfully suggest that that's exactly what you're getting ready to do. And that although the word molest may hit the ear differently than it did when it was inserted into the code, it has a very specific definition in the dictionary. And absent a definition in the code, a court of law will revert to the dictionary definition to assess the legal meaning. And this is a criminal legal standard that we're changing. So it is scrutinized in that way, very, very narrowly, very strictly. And so one definition of molest is assault or abuse someone sexually. Another dictionary definition is pester or harass in an aggressive or persistent manner. Obviously, the word disturb, I think everybody was correct that the word disturb changes the legal standard much more broadly, and that all kinds of conduct could be caught up in disturb that would not be caught up in molest, because disturb doesn't mean pester or harass in an aggressive or persistent manner. But likewise, when you add an intent component with intent to harm or destroy, or with intent to harm, you are very much narrowing the legal standard. And you could see all kinds of scenarios where what this was originally intended to prohibit, the conduct it was originally intended to prohibit, would no longer apply to a situation like that, because it lacks the intent to harm, or the intent to harm or destroy. And so, again, if the gentlewoman is not trying to change the legal standard, I just respectfully suggest that you're doing that, and whichever direction you go in, unless you find a word that means exactly the same thing but sounds better, and I think this is the danger of getting caught up in language, the symbolism of language. This still has a dictionary definition. So again, Mr. Chairman, if we do what the amendments that are now proposed, this crime, which will be much harder to prove, and will eliminate many of the scenarios that it was intended to prohibit and deter, because the legal standard is being changed.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that if you go by the definitions just presented by Delegate Gilbert, you'll find that in the same exact, I imagine, reference point, it says exactly that. Molest is 1, assault, abuse a person, especially a woman or a child, sexually. And then 2, it says dated. So it is clear in the dictionary that this is not a word that's used in our current vernacular. It's a dated word. Secondly, it is true that by adding with intent, your point is well taken that you take a broad situation and you narrow it so that it essentially would be something that you'd have to prove that the intent. I understand that. And if I don't know,
Mr. Chair?
I wasn't finished.
No, I understand, and I wanted to ask the gentlewoman if she would. I am not gratuitously trying to do harm to your bill.
Mm-hmm.
I am concerned that you are changing the legal standard, and you told us that's not what you were trying to do. And I would just ask Mr. Chairman if she would be willing to take it by for the day, and I'd be happy to work with her on the language. And again, I'm not trying to do you harm, and you don't have to trust that, but you're doing something other than what you said you were trying to do, and I just want to help you fix that.
And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. And what I was going to mention is that when it was discussed with the members of the agency, their discussion seemed to state that it was equivocal because you had to have a permit before, and that it was within that word molest, intent was sort of implied in the context before. So if that is not the case,
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Lopez.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman stated.
After this conversation happened in subcommittee and where the agency said that it was implied, the final vote was what, Mr. Chairman?
Subcommittee Chair.
Mr. Chair, the final vote was 7-0.
7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Gilbert.
I'm not sure what point that is supposed to make, that because everyone trusted the agency who does not take a critical eye toward criminal code or its interpretation, that all of a sudden everybody trusted that and it was a 7-0 vote. Again, Mr. Chairman, I am simply trying to make the law do what the patron said she's trying to do, which is get rid of this offensive word and not change the legal standard. And that's exactly when you add a specific intent, especially intent to do X, one can imagine all types of scenarios where you could be doing something where it lacked the intent to do harm or the intent to destroy that would have been captured by existing law that will now not be captured by the new intent standard. And I don't know why no one believes me that I'm trying to help fix this without doing damage.
Mr. Chairman, I absolutely have harbor no feelings that somebody's not trying to help me. I'm just trying to be clear myself based on the information I've been given.
Okay, Subcommittee Chair Delegate Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a response to Delegate Gilbert is, Mr. Chair, is that we did talk a little bit about where this falls in terms of the criminal code. There was a concern that this might have to be also, considered by the Committee on Courts, and the director this morning addressed that there is a criminal code section of some sort in this part of the code, and I might not be using the correct terms, but perhaps if the director could clarify that, and maybe that might address some of the concerns Delegate Gilbert is raising.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, Ryan Brown for the department, and to be clear, we have no position on this bill, and no concern with trying to update language, but my understanding of the patron's intent is exactly what Delegate Gilbert says, which is that she's not trying to change any substantive outcomes. The department would defer to counsel and members of the court, or former members of the courts committee who have experience with these types of things. This is a criminal statute. And I don't think anybody who's involved in the discussion is trying to change outcome in the field. I will say, if you use the second dictionary definition that was cited, there is something more than just what the word disturb would connote involved in that definition. However, the statute that we're looking at today does also include some, on reflection, some unintentional take type activities where you might not be acting with the specific purpose of going out and disturbing the wildlife or pestering it or whatever part of the definition you want to use, but that's a necessary outcome of the activity that you're undertaking. So I don't know if that helps, but I defer to the lawyers on the committee and on staff here on the point. I think we're all of the same opinion that nobody's trying to change the meaning, just update language.
Delegate Wilt, do you have a question, Mr. Brown?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Director, so just to help me clarify my mind, a couple scenarios. So Farmer Weber is making hay, and in that process, he runs over a killdeer nest. Where would he fall, and maybe previously what the law read and what the delegate's trying to do?
I think in response to the discussion that we're having, Delegate Weber would have definitely disturbed the nest, correct? I mean, that's just a matter of what has happened. Under the plain dictionary definition of the word molest that was quoted earlier, he may not have done that. So that's the concern with, or that would be the change you would be affecting by just using the word disturb as a replacement.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Wilt.
Second
wind this up.
scenario, landowner, Wilt is, I'm mowing my yard, and there's a bird that's nested in the bush there around my yard. So I'm mowing, and just maybe just the sound, I get close to the bush, and the sound of the mower flushes the bird. And where would I fall in this?
Mr. Chairman, I think same answer. You definitely disturbed the bird. I don't think you fit the definition of molest. I'd defer to counsel on that.
Okay. Delegate Lopez.
Mr. Chairman, with this new information from the director, I would like to make a motion that if Delegate Adams is okay with it and she's perfectly willing to work with Delegate Gilbert on trying to address this, that we take this bill by for the day.
The motion before us is that we take the bill by for the day. All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We'll take the bill by for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
Thank
members
you.
of the committee. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, we are now down to items to be considered by the full committee. I apologize to the patrons, but let's see, Delegate Moorfield, you are up first.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I believe we have a substitute for House Bill 5.
Substitute, all those, has a substitute been distributed? Sorry. A motion on the substitute be adopted? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Substitute's adopted. Delegate Moorfield.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I have made what I thought was going to be a simple bill complicated by accident. So originally, the locality, Tazewell County, had requested to be included as part of the Virginia Scenic River System. Senator Chafin has a similar bill that was introduced. And after having a conversation with Senator Chafin, we had made the determination that it might be a good idea to include other localities within the Scenic River System on the Clinch River. And as his bill moved forward in the Senate committee hearing process, there were a number of concerns that were raised as to whether or not the localities officially endorsed being a part of that system. And so, as of just a few minutes ago, I learned that only 2 localities have officially requested to be included into the Scenic River System. And so I was going to ask that we pass the bill by for the day, but I know that we have an incredible workload, and I think that we may be able to fix this here in the committee if you would like to try that, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman may proceed.
Okay, I'd ask the committee to refer to lines 57 and 63 in the substitute, and then also lines 70 through 75. And the clerk may have to confirm this with me, but that would be striking the localities of Wise County and Scott County. So let me make it clear that the two localities that have requested to be a part of the scenic river system were Tazewell County and Russell County. You also refer to line 66, Indian Creek near Cedar Bluff in Tazewell County, to the Virginia-Tennessee state line in Scott County. And if I'm not correct, and staff may have to weigh in on this, but I think that we can amend this to, on line 66, Indian Creek near Cedar Bluff in Tazewell County to the line in Russell County and Scott County, and then not include the mileage on line 67.
Okay. Scott, would you report the amendments then? Listen up to the amendments then. To the purpose of these amendments, as I understand it, is to get it down to the jurisdictions that have, by resolution, asked us to designate that, correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, there won't be anybody left that hasn't passed a resolution.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Okay. Scott?
Okay, the first amendment would be to strike lines 57 and 63. That language includes Wise County, who has not submitted a request to be included. Second amendment would be line 66. Strike Virginia-Tennessee state line in Scott County and include after the line in Russell County and Scott County.
Members heard the amendments. Any questions of the patron?
And Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I apologize. And then also strike
70.
a distance of approximately 108 miles and including its tributary. I'm sorry, strike a distance of approximately 108 miles. And I believe that would not include Scott County.
Scott, do you concur?
Mr. Chairman, I think that sounds correct.
Okay.
All right. The amendments are before us. Any questions or discussion? You still have another amendment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's get this cleaned up here in a hurry.
And then also strike lines 70 through 75.
Okay. And any questions about the amendments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those no. This again gets us down to localities that have requested. Delegate Weber, do you have a? Delegate Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe a question for council. My question, we saw a previous piece of legislation that talked about creek, and in the scenic river designation, I mean, is there allowed? Maybe seems trivial, but is it allowed that we designate creeks under the scenic river designation?
Mr.
Counsel.
Chairman?
Go ahead.
It is allowed, and I believe there are already some creeks that are designated, at least as a part of a scenic river.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Moorfield.
if I may elaborate, I think this would clear up some confusion, especially for future scenic river bills. From the research that I've done, in Virginia, if a river is declared a non-navigable waterway and a private property owner owns the property on both sides of the river, they also own the property underneath the river. If you refer to line 66, that is the confluence of Indian Creek and the Clinch River. Under the federal guidelines, the Clinch River is deemed navigable from the confluence of Indian Creek on. And so we didn't want to declare it a scenic river on the non-navigable section of the waterway. So on the navigability argument, if a river is declared navigable, that would fall under federal law, but not if it's non-navigable.
Okay. Delegate Guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any, I'm new to this, and all the scenic river bills we've seen so far have in fact had mileage designations to clarify. I gather that there is no requirement that that be in there.
Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, it is typical to include a mileage designation. I can't say for sure whether all of the scenic river designations have it, but this is something that theoretically we could compute after the fact, and we could insert it later if that's necessary.
Now, Council, you had another question about the surplus verbiage in the bill. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I was just curious about the deletion of lines 57 through 63, only because that doesn't include any new language, so it's just taking out a portion of existing law, and I wasn't sure about that.
Mr. Chairman, and again, I apologize, this just came up a few minutes before presenting the bill. I was just making reference to the Guest River, which, if I'm not mistaken, is in Wise County, and then the Swede Tunnel, which I'm assuming is in Wise County. That I don't know, so that's why I was offering the amendment to strike 57 through 63, just in case that may be included in that locality. So.
Did your amendment take away that language?
I'm sorry, I believe the staff has a comment.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Delegate Moorfield would want to keep that language in because it actually protects those areas mentioned, and it says that scenic river designation shall not be construed to prevent the operation of a pipeline, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
The amendments before us, all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the amendment's agreed to. Bills before us.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to delay here, but I want to understand, is line 57 through 63 still in the bill?
Yes.
Thank you.
Been moved and second that the bill as amended be reported, a report with a substitute. Clerk will open the roll. Cast your vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. Bill is reported 11 ayes, 6 nays. Thank you, Mr. Warfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you to the staff. This was completely my fault.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll hold you accountable. Next bill up is, excuse me, House Bill 886. This relates to the State Trails Advisory Committee. As you know, on our advisory committees, they typically have expiration dates. This committee would expire before our next meeting, and so this would extend the time for 6 years. This is the advisory committee that puts together this wonderful series of trails that we have around Virginia now that's so often promoted as a way to increase tourism. And there are numerous examples of the success it's had with developing these state trails. That's the bill. I would move that it be reported. Been moved and seconded that the bill be reported. There's any questions or discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will open the roll. Cast your vote. Close the roll. 15 ayes and 1 nay. The bill is reported. I want to announce that on House Bill 1234, Delegate Wilt, your bill, and House Bill 1593, what has happened since these bills have been introduced is that there's an omnibus bill coming to us that takes into account all these African-American cemeteries, and there's going to be an effort to try to consolidate those. There's no harm to your bill by going by today. It simply will allow us to take it up as part of a larger bill that encompasses this process. So hearing no objection, then we will pass by for the day House Bill 1234 and House Bill 1593. We're down now to House Bill 1598. Okay.
Chairman, if you permit me, Delegate Ferris is not here, but this is a bill that was put in the request of some of the localities that I represent.
Gentleman may proceed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, David Blunt with Thomas Jefferson Planning District. And this bill comes to you at the request of the counties of Albemarle, Buckingham, and Fluvanna, as well as the town of Scottsville. DCR did their analysis and float of a 20-mile segment of the James River back in the fall, and subsequently made its recommendations. It's a 20-mile segment from near the Warren Boat Ramp in Albemarle County to New Canton. And I do have resolutions from all of the 4 local governing bodies, and would appreciate the committee's support to report the bill.
Any questions of the gentleman? Hearing none, the bill is before us. Another scenic river designation. Is there a motion? Moved and report in a second. Let's open the electronic voting system here. Cast your vote. The bill is close the roll. The bill is reported 13-4. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then I believe what may be the final bill for today, Delegate Edmonds, is House Bill 1601. I would ask the council to be able to tell us after the presentation of this bill, how much river line do we have that's not designated scenic? Delegate Edmonds.
Mr. Chairman, again, this designates that 62 river mile section of the Stanton River from the, as you can see on the from the Route 761 at Long Island Bridge to a distance of approximately 62.8 miles as a scenic river. And it does accompany resolutions from the both county of Charlotte and Halifax.
Any questions of the patron? Hearing none, the motion, Delegate Edmonds moves, second, that this House Bill 1601 be reported. Clerk will open the roll. Cast your vote. Everyone voted? The vote is always 13-4. Thank you, Delegate Edmonds. Bill is reported. That completes the work of the committee for today. I want to say for those of you who are new to this process, my reference earlier to Delegate Vic Thomas comes with the highest level of respect. He was chair of this committee. He was chair of this committee for couple of decades at least, and one of his prime issues was that we not have Sunday hunting. He will stand, I'm sure, very proud of what we did today. No more business to come before us. We'll stand adjourned.